The geopolitical issue, I've always said it, whether my narrative is right or wrong. I always said, look, if there was no geopolitical issue, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And it's obviously that we are having this conversation, and the issue is there. I do think that because of that, this will be sustained going forward, as opposed to, all right, we're all mates again, let's go back to where it was.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that kind of thinking?
Well, I think the thing about China is they've developed a lot of expertise in downstream processing of rare earths, and that expertise does not exist in the West to that level, in particular separating out rare earth concentrates. I think there's the issue is getting a bit clouded. Are we against the Chinese owning assets, or are we trying to stop them getting offtake agreements and financing? Because they're two different things. And the FIRB is designed around, preventing ownership or reviewing ownership, particularly on strategic assets like ports and maybe uranium. So I think we've got to be clear what we're trying to achieve, because if the capital expenditure of these projects is very large, I'm not saying it will be, but if it is, the last 20 years that money has come from China. So we need to try and work out what we're actually trying to do. If we're trying to protect ownership, that's fine. But we've got to bear in mind that it all goes back to China. They've got the demand. They're our biggest, WA's biggest client. So I think we've got to work with China, not against them.
It's interesting because there's a lot of, sort of people jokingly say that China's people just want to make money.
Yeah.
They're not about conquering the world.
Yeah.
And if I were to look into China, and not being a expert, it seems that they just want to equalize the income levels and not have that spike of super rich and very, very poor, because that still exists. The very poor still exists.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I guess, with your thoughts just then, that it is, they still want to make money.
Yeah.
As long as we, from our nationalistic view, you can't own the thing, but you can buy the products.
Yeah.
I think that works, right?
I think it does. And then, iron ores, we've been selling iron ore to China since the 1960s. So, they are the buyer of iron ore. Why shouldn't we sell rare earths to them? Well, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. But there's going to be a lot of pressure from the US and other Western governments, particularly with the Southwest, its location, right next to a port, potentially very large resources, globally significant, comparable to Mountain Pass, the Chinese deposits. So I think the tension's going to increase in the next 2 to 3 years to look at more downstream processing and more distribution of those products through Western countries.
Because one of the things I've seen that strikes an interesting thought is that if everybody there have big volumes and you make it work, you become a major province like the Hamersley Range for iron ore, right?
Yeah.
And you have and we all know economies of scale works, right? Speaks loudly.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting. If this thing works, this whole region would just blow up.
It's enormous. I mean, some of the highest value agricultural land is around Esperance. So, Esperance is potentially one of the biggest boom towns in WA over the next 5 to 10 years. They've been making a lot of money from the grain. Fortunately, a lot of the rare earth deposits that are being explored are on Crown land or marginal land. So we're not necessarily competing for the same ground. But it could be an interesting few years.